I'm here this afternoon with Representative Drew Darby from District 72, and everything has just started. Tell me what this session looks like to you.
Well, it started with lots of pomp and pageantry and circumstance. We took the oath of office yesterday, and that was wonderful to have your family and your friends all around the gallery full of folks. And
It sure was.
and we, it's a very important part of the process that, that we take an oath and we agree to be bound by those wonderful words and to maintain that spirit through the next 140 days, certainly in the session, but that oath binds us for our entire term of serving in the legislature. And so it's an important part of the process, and I think it gives us a frame of reference to not only to begin, but how we conduct ourselves during the whole time. We also elected a speaker, and that was an important process that happens at the start of every session. And so we had rules that we had to, temporary rules that we adopted, and so we got through that. I thought we put that behind us. That was important.
Representative Strauss got a strong vote.
A strong vote, and I think reflected the will of the House. And so now we move forward, and the business begins. And I tell people, I said, don't get focused on the first vote of the session. There's a lot of important things that we're going to do this in the next 140 days. And for the people of Texas, we're going to set the tone for a lot of important issues. And we're going to talk about some of those issues today, and how I believe that they're going to be at the forefront of what the impetus of this session is going to be. So it's an exciting time. I've got a lot of new members, a lot of new staff personnel throughout the Capitol. I'm fortunate, and the people of House District 72 are fortunate that we have a consistent staff that have been seasoned. 3 of them were here last session with me, and they're back together. I've got the band back together, as they say, and I think that bodes well for my constituent services. There are lots of issues that come up not only during the session but during the interim that they're able to handle with, whether it be licensing or issues, funding, that sort of thing. I am fortunate to have Cheryl De Cordova in my district office. I think she is well respected as someone who gets things done, and so that's what we want to do. That's why we're down here. We're representatives of 170,000 folks that live and work in the Concho Valley, and not all have one political spectrum that they adhere to, but certainly they all have needs, and so that's what I want to focus in on. I've told people many times I'm kind of a meat and potatoes guy, a lot of potatoes, but the reality is I believe in a good public education system. I believe in a good job, and I believe in water available, and I believe in transportation. And if we have all of those, and people will live and work in San Angelo and the Concho Valley, and if they do, then I think that brings vibrance and a thriving setting that we can all love our families, raise our families, and make sure they succeed in life. So, and then there are some that are the most vulnerable in our community, and we need to never forget them and need to reach out and try to make their time here least painful and as fulfilling as we can. So having said all that, if I look at my priorities for this next session, I have every session had something to do with the budget. I've served on appropriations every session, and I don't know where my role will be in this next legislative session, but at some point I know I'll have involvement with the budget, because we all do. This is 150 members that have responsibility over the budget. I want to make sure that that budget truly reflects the priorities of Texas. Make sure that we have a responsible budget that addresses the needs and the expectations of the people of Texas. We have 27 million people living in this state. 27 million, and we talk about the growth, we talk about people moving our state, and they don't bring their water with them, they don't bring their roads with them, they don't bring their school buildings with them, but they expect all that when they get here. And so my job is to make sure we have all of that. And so I truly expect that the budget will be reflective of the priority needs of this state. I see that our budget will have another attempt to bring truth in budgeting and transparency to the process. I have been informed by the Speaker's office that he wants me to carry HB 7, House Bill 7, which I carried last session, addressing our general revenue dedicated accounts, and make sure that when we collect fees as a state, that those fees go directly for the purposes for which we started collecting them. If we collect the money from the people of Texas, we want to make sure it goes for the purpose we told them about. And we did a great job with House Bill 7 last session, and we reduced our revenue and appropriated money for the purposes which we intended it to do to the tune of about $1 billion, a little over $1 billion. And I've already been informed that I'm going to be carrying HB 7 again this year. And so we'll continue that effort. We've now reduced the GR dedicated balances from $5 billion down to $4 billion. In this budget, hopefully we'll reduce another $1 billion to $3 billion. So we're working our way out of the problem. We're making great strides, and that will be one of my primary focuses in this legislative session on that.
With the oil prices having just come down, what impact are you going to, what factor will that be in looking at the budget this coming session?
Well, it'll be at the forefront of all our minds. I will tell you that the Comptroller of Public Accounts has looked at that and tried to have a crystal ball. The problem with Texas budgeting is we try to meet in odd-numbered years and project a budget for the next 2 years beginning in August. This time in August of 2015, we'll start the 16-17 biennial budget. And so we have to project out what our revenues are going to be. And we're constitutionally limited that we cannot spend more than the revenue that we'll have. We can't spend money we don't have. And then we have constitutional limits as to the size of the growth in our economy. We have an expanding economy, and so we want to make sure that that budget accommodates the growing needs of Texans. And so my role on the Legislative Budget Board is to set the growth for the state's economy in the next biennium, the growth in spending on the state's economy. And we took the lowest growth factor that is within our constitutional responsibility to set, at 11.87%. That's the lowest of all the 4 models that was presented to the Legislative Budget Board. So we've set a top limit on what this state's budget can grow by. I don't anticipate that we'll spend that much money. And so I expect us to spend less than that. According to the biennial revenue estimate, the state will finish this budget cycle with about $7.5 billion more in revenue than we originally anticipated, so there'll be a surplus. That $7.5 billion will carry forward to the next biennium in the 16-17. For projection purposes and forecasting purposes, the Comptroller has estimated and used $65 a barrel. So even though it's not 100 and it's not the 80, it's not 40 either. So they put a projection of $65 a barrel for 2016 and $70 a barrel for 2017. Now, whether it achieves that or not, we'll know when we get there. So that's the basis of the projections. Now, I'll point out to everybody in West Texas, you know, we've seen a housing boom, we've seen demand on salaries, a increase in property values. All of that will reflect a lowering of oil and gas prices if they are sustained at this level. There's no question that it'll affect housing, no question it'll affect a school population, growth in our schools, no question it'll reflect city budgets, county budgets. So that will all be reflective if the price stays where it is today. Nobody anticipates that it will stay today that way. But if it continues, then our revenue estimates will have to be reflective of that. Now, while that is a drag on the economy, certainly in West Texas, if you'll look at your individual home budgets, you'll see that you have more disposable income. Because a tank of gas, my pickup that used to cost 80 bucks, 85 bucks, now costs me about 50 or $55. And you know, where you have people that have to fill up and get to their jobs and their schools, there's an automatic increase in their disposable income. And when there's an increase in disposable income, that is reflected in people's spending habits. They dispose of that income, they buy things. And so as they buy things, we get a bump in sales taxes. Sales taxes continue to rise in Texas. 14% sales tax increase. So while the good Lord taketh away in the form of reduced severance taxes, the state gets severance taxes by the extraction of oil and gas. While our severance taxes are projected to decrease because of the reduced price, it's based upon price, then we anticipate an increase in sales taxes. The two don't offset equally, but there is an offsetting factor for that. And so that's used part of the biennial revenue estimate that the controller has. They anticipate an increase or a flattening of sales taxes. So that's good news for Texas. So it's not all bad news. It's some good in there, and so, you know, the people that are listening to this will be reflective of their own household budgets, and they'll see that their gasoline expenses have gone down, and hopefully, you know, they can save part of that, or if they need to spend part of it for food or other goods and services, then they can. So it's some good news. So I anticipate that with that biennial revenue estimate, we'll have money available under the spending cap to address the needs. Now, what are those needs? We have needs in public education. The court has already said that our way that we fund schools is ineffective. It's unconstitutional. It doesn't provide for the assurances, adequacy, sufficiency of us enough that the Constitution requires. We'll have to look at that. That may be a way that we have to address. One of my personal favorites is maybe we can address the transportation allotment. A lot of schools in West Texas spend a lot of money on transportation. We only reimburse them for a portion of that. Hopefully we can address that and give them more for their transportation needs. I think that we're not going to have an ultimate fix for school funding until after the court weighs in, but we're gonna weigh in on that and try to bring some sensibility to that, and try to increase, from my perspective, ways that we can get help for our schools. Transportation allotment's one of them. Basic allotment is another. Cost of education index is another one that we'll be looking at. So, public education. Higher education. Of all the places in the budget we've cut the most, it's higher education. The state's responsibility today is a fraction of what it was in 2003 when we deregulated higher institution. The state used to contribute about 50% to the budgets of our schools. Now we contribute less than 20% to a lot of the budgets. The University of Texas, we only give them 13% of their budget. So it's hard for the state to mandate requirements of our higher education when our responsibility and effort with regard to financing their operations continues to go down. Well, how have they done that? They've increased tuition to their students. And so students and their families have had to pay for that. They've got it, they're pricing higher education beyond affordability. We need to look at that. That is a high priority of mine. We have not addressed the infrastructure needs of our institutions either through tuition. And I anticipate that will be a legislative focus that we can look at, helping our schools with building an engineering building or nursing building at Angel State University. Across the board, we've not had any tuition revenue bonds for a number of years, and we need to address that. So that's another high priority of mine. The second is we need to continue the work we did in our water funding through Prop 6 and through the SWIFT Water Infrastructure Bank. You know, when I see the projections of our population, and this state's population is going to increase some 60% over the next 15, 20 years, our net water resources are going to go down 10%. So while our population continues to increase, the available water is going to go down. How are we going to do that? We're going to have to continue to work on making it available to cities like San Angelo, Midland, Abilene, all our West Texas communities to have access to sufficient water resources. So that will be a priority of mine, and again to make sure we get as many transportation dollars to our roads as we can. The most dangerous part in America, the most dangerous highways in America, is west of San Angelo. And so we're going to have to continue to look to improve those roads. And so I will always be on the search to try to find resources. How we do that, Prop 1 that everybody approved last fall is important. We're going to get that money out. But again, that money is dependent upon severance taxes. And so as severance taxes go down, that pot of transportation dollars goes down. We're going to end diversions. That's a common phrase. That means that we're going to find ways to fund Department of Public Safety from another source other than out of our Fund 6, which is our gasoline tax and our registration fees. That's going to be a real effort on my part to make sure we end that diversion. And so I apologize for that. My phone's ringing. I apologize. Let me ignore that. I'm so sorry. Get back to what I'm saying. We're going to end diversions, and that's an important thing for us to do, is end that diversions and fund DPS, an important state agency. Border security. Let me move this a little further away.
Oh, it's that one.
But we're gonna have to provide for protection for our border. That's another important thing. We're going to have to make sure that we continue the effort to protect our border. Critical importance. We've started that through my work on the LBB. We've approved a program that provides funding for DPS through the end of August. We're going to continue that. Increase their presence, increase their hours, increase their responsibilities. They have interdiction powers.
Now, will this be a new bill? Because I thought the one that did get passed ended March 31.
No, we have funded, what you're referring to is the presence of the National Guard.
Yep.
If you'll recall, Governor Perry called up the National Guard at a time where we needed increased manpower. They did respond to the tune of about 800 to 1,000 personnel. The problem with the National Guard is that they have no interdiction powers. They don't have a power to arrest and detain anyone. The Department of Public Safety has that right, along with the Customs and the Border Security folks. What they were simply doing is manning observation towers. They were literally, it takes 15 National Guard personnel to man one observation tower. These observation towers are sometimes located in parking lots at Walmart. So you would have a observation tower erected in the Walmart parking lot, elevated on expandable like a ladder, and it takes 15 National Guard personnel, 3 on a shift, 5 shifts during the day and night for 24/7 coverage of that observation tower. Now that's important. I don't want to diminish the role of that, but I think it is a poor resource when we could have had one live video stream from that parking lot manned by a central processing center. Then you would have documented proof of violations of the law. Those videos have time and date stamped on them, so that when you record or observe something, you have memorialized digital evidence of that violation. And so I think our National Guard, they're well intended and they served a terrific purpose, and I congratulate them on their service. there are better ways, more efficient ways to do that. And so I think we have embarked on a plan to increase hours through our Department of Public Safety, 4,000 video cameras that we can now monitor. And so I think this is a much more prudent and cost-efficient manner to protect our border. And so that's what we're doing. That process is going to continue through the end of August. We have funded that program through the end of August. National Guard's presence is stopped at the end of March. So, but that does not mean we're pulling back from the border. Conversely, we are increasing our presence on the border.
That's a good point.
And so we are simply doing it smarter. Those DPS officers have interdiction powers. They can arrest somebody. Literally, there are stories of immigrants that walk up to an observation post. The National Guard, they didn't have any ability to detain them. They just said, "Would y'all wait here while I call a DPS officer?" And they walk off, and they have no ability to detain them. So it just does. A lot of people are confused and uncertain about what they perceive maybe as a pullback of our presence on the border, but I can assure you we are not pulling back.
So will those cameras all be in place by April 1st?
Yes, it's anticipated that all those 4,000, the technology is readily available on the market. We just simply have to deploy them in the field and then monitor them, and it's a whole lot cheaper to do that, and I think better for evidentiary purposes to do that. So I anticipate that will be a huge part of our agenda going forward, border security. So I think that we've talked about transportation, water, public education, jobs. We continue to need to have low regulation and less involvement from the government. But just as important as we have this opportunity, I think we need to look at our tax system and say, is it a fair tax that we're collecting? Is it a necessary tax? Is it a tax that needs to be modified, reduced, or extinguished? We'll be taking a hard look at our margins tax to see what the options are to make that a better way to do things. Property taxes, I for one, and I'm sure everybody that's listening to this video understands that property taxes continue to escalate and valuations continue to escalate. Of course, we all want our homes to go up in value. Who doesn't want your property to be worth more? But it brings with it a consequence. And so if property taxes continue to escalate, then it puts a very detrimental effect upon every citizen in the state. And so we want to make sure that what we collect is meaningful and that it's used properly and not wasted. And so we're going to take a look at our property valuation system and property taxes, our margins tax, our whole tax structure. I anticipate a substantive tax cut. Some way, somehow, I think we're going to be able to effectuate some taxes. I'm not prepared at this juncture. Come back later and we'll talk about specifics, but the reality is we're going to do some meaningful tax cuts. I think the governor's behind that, the lieutenant governor's behind it, Speaker Strauss is behind it, and we're behind it. And we just need to be prudent that we don't do something that later damages a priority of this state. And so that's high on the agenda in this next legislative session, and I anticipate working hard for that. So I think there's going to be some 7,500 bills filed. We're pretty near 800 or 900 right now. There'll be a lot of bills filed, and we'll sort through all those. There'll be some good things, and there'll be some that we'll hold our nose and vote for, and then there'll be some that we just can't vote for. And in the end, we've got to do what's right for the people we represent. So
you're going to be busy this session.
It's going to be a very busy session. I don't leave my family and my job and my community to come down here simply to sit idly by and watch the process go forward. I come by. I'm involved in the system to make sure we work hard to bring solutions. I think you and everyone that this video will go out to understands that we have responsibilities. We are caretakers, not only for the infrastructure of the state, but for the people who live here. And you know, we've got an aging road system. Our bridges are aging. Our hospitals were built in the 50s. They now are 60, 70 years old. We have aging college campuses. And so with the growth in this state brings responsibilities. And I look at myself as a caretaker, as someone who's responsible for the building of Texas. And so I take that responsibility serious, and we're going to have to fix. I want to fix things. I just don't want to. I just don't want to put a Band-Aid on issues. Some issues we have to put Band-Aids on because we don't have the resources to fix them, or the desire to address it. But those issues that need our attention and need our efforts to responsibly maintain those assets and responsibility, I want to do. I want to try to accomplish that.
Well, I'm looking forward to being with you quite a bit throughout this session so that you can keep us all informed on what's going on and what's ahead of us.
Well, I look forward to the discussion, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kat.